You know, you talked about having the states take care of the education issues, but many of the states have not. Teachers have more and more on their plates with having to deal with children with extreme behavioral problems in their classrooms. School districts' hands are tied when dealing with some of these problems. Can we do to help school districts and their teachers deal effectively with these issues?
Well, you and I need to have a longer conversation. I'll listen to you.
Thank you.
I'd say a couple of things. Number one is look, I went to Catholic school for 8 years. The Board of Education was applied to my seat of knowledge more than once in those 8 years. And the nuns knew how to get the paddle out when you deserved it. I guarantee you I deserved it more times than I got it. I think traditional discipline being returned to our schools as opposed to flooding our kids with Ritalin and other behavior modification chemicals makes more sense to me. I've had a great concern over the last 30 years with the advent of instead of treating discipline cases with the old-fashioned way.
I agree.
That we end up medicating kids, and with psychotropic drugs that I worry sometimes create even worse conditions. So that's a piece of it to me, is just affirming once again that, the Bible says, spare the rod, spoil the child. I'm a believer in that. But I also think the American people deserve to know that many of our public schools are medicating kids instead of disciplining kids. And I think we ought to get back to more traditional discipline, allow schools, make it clear that that's acceptable, just as it was in our time for the kids today. The other piece is I'm just a real believer that we've got to have a conversation on the more severe cases about a return to institutional mental health care in this country. We see these tragic incidents, mass shootings.
Yes.
Almost without exception, young, troubled men. And almost every story, like when I think of the Marjory Stoneman Douglas School, I thought of the catastrophic loss of life there. But what grieved me was to hear how many times the shooter's mother had gone to local authorities and to school authorities and said, he's a danger. Yeah. You have to help me do something with him.
Nothing gets done.
And they had nowhere to go.
Right.
And I think I think as a nation we need to have a conversation about returning to creating institutional mental health as an option for families.
Thank you.
It's begun to come back. You probably observed that here in Iowa, and we have in India. One of the last things I did as governor of Indiana was we broke ground on the first mental health hospital built in 35 years in our state. But I have to believe that it's part of the equation of getting past these horrific incidents of violence is expanding institutional resources for families. It also deals with kids that are they're mainstreamed into public school, and they don't have the emotional and mental facility to be there.
Yes, thank you.
A follow-up on that as well, when you are talking about identifying potential problems that could turn into mass shootings or mass shooters, if you were president, how would you address that? Would you be comfortable with red flag laws of trying to create a database, or trying to train state workers on who should not be allowed to have guns in a house, or things like that? How would you actually approach that as president?
I think the right to keep and bear arms is enshrined in the Constitution. We never want to erode that right for law-abiding citizens. And any of those measures, the concern is about due process of law.
Sure.
I'm just talking about creating options for parents. I mean, I gave a speech not long ago about this whole issue. I thought a couple of things about mass shooting that we ought to deal with. Number one is expanding institutional mental health in the country.
Yeah.
I've just talked to too many grieving parents. And I've read too many stories of families that had that troubled individual who said, well, I know where to go. I've talked to sheriffs that have said, the county lockup is where people end up going. They're there for 3 days and then we turn them loose.
Yeah.
We can't keep them. They shouldn't. So to me, that's part of it. The other part of it, though, is I think it's one of the things I would have a conversation with Congress the day I arrived. You know, I know most of those people personally, right? Right. And I would say, let's just, okay, first appropriations bill, we're going to have a line item. Every public and private school in America is going to have a full budget from the federal government to hire a trained resource officer, armed, trained resource officer at the school, period. And take the whole budget issue out of it for states, for local communities. We just should end that conversation. The other piece is I think justice delayed is justice denied. I mean, the very idea that the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shooter is going to spend the rest of his life in jail, that's not justice. It's not justice. And I'm advocating a federal death penalty statute that would have expedited due process, meaning from the time you are charged to the time you meet your fate is months, not years. And so it's that deranged person who's thinking about this cannot think in terms of, I may survive this and end up living 20 years in jail. That's not going to happen. And now, is it going to impact everybody? Probably not. Some of these people are just twisted and evil. But on the margins, I believe it could. And so those are the kind of things that I would look at. But mostly it's just about empowering parents to have resources to be able to say that, to be able to go into a court and say we want to look at the opportunity to have our son, and mostly we're talking about young men, you know, involuntarily placed into an institution where they can get the kind of treatment that they need, and then having support for that.
Thank you.